in with us. Well, welcome. We're so glad that each of you are here with us this afternoon. It's lovely to see some faces we haven't seen in a while. Glad that you're back. All of you know me, so my name is Melissa, and you know who Imaginarium is, but I do want to remind you that the whole reason why we do everything that we do is because of these core values that we all not only believe in, but sort of stake all of the things that we do. They have to come back to these values. And it's the belief in the inherent worth and magic of every living thing, our inherent connection to each other, the human family, and the natural world around us. And finally, and equally, then an inherent responsibility that we have to ourselves, to each other, and to the natural world. And so that is why we gather. And otherwise, the sky's the limit as to what we do and discuss. And we have a lot of fun around here. So I'm glad that you're all with us for this next hour and 30 minutes or so. Um, today's two things. I did get around to social media because it's been busy, but it's International Day of the Girl. And I just want to name that as we celebrate and honor the young girls in the world and continue to find ways to empower them and to help them recognize their rights and the unique challenges that they face. So may we be reminded of that and celebrate the girls in your life. And also it's National Coming Out Day, which I don't know how about you all. Sometimes I have mixed feelings about this day. On one hand, we want to honor and celebrate. We are inclusive, wholly inclusive. And so any of our LGBTQ plus folks, we honor and celebrate all of you, every bit of you. And yet I just wish there wasn't, I wish that we didn't live in a world. And so my hope is that we continue to create a world together, that there will be no more closets and no more need for coming out of anything. But no doubt, please know that those of you in this chat right now, we already celebrate you, but specifically we do so today. So happy National Coming Out Day. We do practices around here that help us just stay centered and grounded. And most of you, save Rabbi Lori and maybe Ivy, are familiar with those practices. So each of us lead a different one, or a few of us lead a different one. And we'll start off with what we call our naming practice. And this is simply a couple things. One, it's an opportunity to introduce or reintroduce yourself so we can continue to get to know each other. So we want to know your name, we want to know your preferred pronouns, and we would like to know exactly where you're calling in from this afternoon. But also as you're doing this, it's also a reminder for you to take up your space, to understand your deeply inherent worth and magic, and to know that your voice matters not only in this next hour and a half, but in this world. And so take up your space. And for some of us, we need to be reminded to not take up too much space, right? Just our space, and make room for others as well. So because it's Zoom, I just call you out. It feels redundant, but I'm just going to call your name and then you can reintroduce yourselves and we'll go from there. So Rabbi Lori, would you start for us, please?
Yes. So hi, my name is Rabbi Lori Rice. Lori. I'm so delighted to be with this community. I've sort of been coveting and desiring to be a part of Imaginarium since I met Melissa, who I don't think I need to tell any of you is quite the force for amazing things in this world. So I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm sorry it took so long to come, but thank you for welcoming me.
We're so honored you're here. So honored. All right, Nathan.
Nathan Johns. I live in Lebanon, Tennessee, and excited to hear what this is about today.
Yay. Thanks, Nathan. Leah. Oh, wait, we can't hear you. Hold on. Now
I thought I had unmuted it already. My name is Leah. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I live in Nashville.
Glad you're with us. JJ.
Hello, I'm JJ, he, him, his, and I am in Nashville as well.
Lovely. Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug Day, Franklin, Tennessee, and he, him.
Yay. Thanks, Doug. Malia.
Hi, I'm Malia Carden, she, her, hers, Brentwood, Tennessee.
Yay. Thanks, Malia. Cindy.
Hi, Cindy Hoppus, Spring Hill, Tennessee, she, her, hers.
Also my mother. Ryan.
Hey, Ryan Greenewalt from calling from East Nashville. Calling on, well, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm in East Nashville. He, him, my husband's gonna be here soon. Evan, you know him well. Yay. Bye. Sorry, I don't know why I made that awkward.
We're glad you're back. Sarah.
I'm Sarah from Nashville, Tennessee. She, hers. Yeah, great. Glad to be back.
Yay. Alana.
Hi, I'm a gender woman and she, hers, and I live in Houston, Texas.
Alana, just FYI, you're breaking up again. So check that mic. So when you have an opportunity to share again, we want to hear you. But thank you. Hausers.
Hey, Chris Hauser from Brentwood, he, him, his.
Linda, his wife. I don't have a preference in pronouns.
Lovely. Glad you're both here. Ivy.
Hi, I'm Ivy. I live in Nashville, close to Brentwood. She, her, hers.
Lovely. So glad you're with us, Ivy. Abby.
I'm Abby, she, her, and I live in Tacoma, Washington.
Woohoo!
And I'm excited to be back. It's been a long time and I missed everybody.
We're so glad you're back. Love it. All right, I think that's everybody. And if somebody sneaks in, we'll catch them too. So everybody take a deep breath. We are so honored that each and every one of you are here in this space. I'm gonna hand it off to JJ. And when we have someone else coming in, but we'll grab her once she gets connected. Okay, JJ.
All right, well, our next practice is called Tell Me Something Good. And this is a practice that we do every time we gather, just to call out and name the good that is in the world. And as a reminder that for ourselves and for each other, that even in the midst of chaos, in the midst of some hard things, there is a lot of lovely things and a lot of good in the world. And we want to name those, not in spite of the dark things, but in light of it all, that those both coexist together. And so we just, we call that out and just kind of point to it and name the good things that have happened recently. And we launch into that with a little song, and that's part of our practice as well. That is very fun and chaotic over Zoom. And I'll sing it first, and then what's going to happen is everybody is going to unmute, and we're all going to sing it together and enter into the lovely chaos together. So it just goes like this. Tell me something good. Okay, here we go. So everybody unmute, and then I'll count us to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Tell me something good.
Oh, great.
I love it every time. Every time it makes me so happy. Okay, that's one of my something goods, because it really genuinely tickles me and makes me so happy every time. Okay, so if you have something good that you would like to call out and share, just raise your hand, because I think we're all on the same screen. So just kind of raise your hand physically or in the chat, and I will call you out. Abby.
Last week I got a job, so I'm very excited. I've been job hunting for 10 months, and so it is like, it feels surreal, like it hasn't fully sunk in, but I'm really, really excited. So just very good news for my life.
That's fantastic.
And my sanity.
That is something good for sure. Oh, I love that. Sarah.
Yes. So my school was recognized by the state for their distance learning model. And so they got a grant basically to do kind of a fellows program of teachers kind of being deployed out to do PD for the state of Tennessee. And I was accepted into that fellows program. So I'm really excited to be able to share what we've been creating and developing so that all kids have an accessible and equitable education. So yeah.
Yay, very cool. Monica.
Hello, everyone. It's been a little while. Something good happened to me with my dad. Didn't pass. He passed out twice, lost heartbeat. I put a pacemaker in him very last moment. So he's alive, and that's good. it's very good. I'm very happy for that. So
That is good.
That's amazing. Hey, Monica, sorry, will you, since you weren't here a minute ago, will you tell us where you're calling in from and your preferred pronouns?
Spring Hill, Tennessee, she, hers.
Love it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Other goodness?
I got one.
Yes.
I'm headed out to travel with Haven for dance next weekend for the first time. And I'm super excited about it. We're just driving. It's Knoxville. I'm obviously a little bit hesitant on how it will all go. They've changed a whole bunch of stuff. Like only I can go in to watch her while she's doing the competition and the judges are there. So there's no audience. So that will feel different for her and all the dancers. But nonetheless, I think it's just exciting for her to get back at it and she's excited about it. And we're excited for some sense of normalcy, even if it's new normalcy. So.
Anybody else? Rabbi Lori.
So in the Jewish world, we just finished our huge holiday period. It's sort of the Christmas, Easter equivalent. And this was a very new year for us because all of it was virtual. Almost all of it was virtual. And we prayed to every God we knew a name for that the tech would work. And it not only worked, but I think we were able to offer something really creative and different to our community this year, and just grateful to be on the other side of it. So
yay, love that. Anybody else? Well, wonderful. Thank you everybody for sharing and always bringing a smile to our face with all the goodness. And just as a reminder that these are practices. And so this thing we practice in a community together, but that we also continue to practice this as we head out from here and continue to speak about the good that's in the world and point to the light that we see. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to do our land acknowledgement.
Yes, so here at Imaginarium, we want to acknowledge, take a moment to honor the land and acknowledge the people who first inhabited the land, and also acknowledge the erasure of the indigenous peoples of the land. So here in Nashville, this is the land that once was inhabited by the Shawnee. And so we give thanks for the ways creation always is speaking to us and caring for us. And just this past week, I got to spend some time in Zion National Park, which is in Utah, which is once inhabited by the Ute peoples. And I found a little prayer that was written by the Ute people. I thought I'd share that with us. It's called Earth Teach Me. Earth teach me quiet as the grasses are still with new light. Earth teach me suffering as old stones suffer with memory. Earth teach me humility as blossoms are humble with beginning. Earth, teach me caring as mothers nurture their young. Earth, teach me courage as the tree that stands alone. Earth, teach me limitation as the ant that crawls on the ground. Earth, teach me freedom as the eagle that soars in the sky. Earth, teach me acceptance as the leaves that die each fall. Earth, teach me renewal as the seed that rises in the spring. Earth, teach me not to forget, Earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life. Earth, teach me to remember kindness as dry fields weep with rain. So it's Indigenous Peoples Day tomorrow, so may this be so and always.
So I think I'll go next with the anti-racism acknowledgement. We as a community recognize that white supremacy and systemic racism are an insidious part of our society. Intentional or not, we recognize the harmful impact of its presence in our lives and the impact it has on Black, Indigenous, and people of color members of this community and other communities around us. We commit ourselves to an active practice of anti-racism. We commit to rooting out and addressing racism whenever and wherever we find it, starting within each of us, but extending into our communities and the greater world around us. And I'll pass it over to Leah.
Hey y'all, I'm gonna lead us today in our embodiment practice. This helps us to be in touch with our physical bodies, because that's really important. I know, especially me, can get caught up in my head sometimes. But also just to center ourselves in this moment, like whatever's been going on in your life this week or even today. Let's take this moment to focus on being in our bodies, being with each other, and to get ready for the conversation we're going to have. So put your hands together like this, and we're going to go from thumb to pinky as we tap each finger, saying the words stop, breathe, know your worth. Okay, now say it with me. Stop, breathe, know your worth. Okay, one more time. Stop, breathe, know your worth.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. Also, Sarah, will you share that prayer in the chat, please? And Nathan, will you also share the anti-racist acknowledgement? I've been meaning to do that, asking you all each week, and I keep forgetting. That way, each and every one of you can have it. You can save it and copy it if you'd like. Okay, yeah, as JJ said, we hope that you use all of those practices whenever you need them, not just in these moments, but throughout your work and throughout your week. We, again, are so honored that Rabbi Lori is with us. She is a very busy woman, and I have been hesitant to ask her, and I'm so glad that when I did ask her this time, she was an easy yes, and that this is one thing that life is allowing us because we're online. It's affording more opportunities to be able to cross over in some spaces. So Lori, we're so glad you're here. I had known of Congregation Micah. I used to, most of you know this, I used to pastor at a progressive Christian church in Franklin. And so I was aware of Congregation Micah, but did not have the privilege of meeting Lori until about, I guess it was 3 summers ago at Spirituality Night, for Pride Spirituality Night. So she was there, and some of her community were participating in the choir with us. So we got to know them. But then after that, she and I went to have drinks in Green Hills together. And I was sharing about Imaginarium, which was, we were only about 6 months old at the time, just sharing my heart about who we are and our intentions and what we're trying to do. And her response was, oh, it sounds literally just like Congregation Micah without the religious part. And I was like, I love it. We're down then. So anyways, I'm so glad that she's here. I wanted her just to share a little bit about her story, and maybe start with sort of your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and how did you end up in Nashville? And I have a few more fun questions, and then we'll open it up to all of us too, as usual.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for having me again. It's really so terrific to be here and meet everyone. I love those practices, especially the 5 points on the fingers. I'll be using that often. I am originally from California. I grew up in the Los Angeles area. And even though I grew up in a Jewish family, my parents were Jewish, my grandparents were Jewish, we were fairly secular and assimilated. I can tell you, I think I remember 20 terrific Christmases in my home. That's how assimilated we were. We were your typical, in the Jewish world, we call it the high holy day family. We went for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur just to sort of check that box. But my parents were very civically involved, and I didn't realize growing up that their compulsion to be civically engaged came from sort of their Jewish calling. But that wasn't really described or pointed out to me, so I didn't make the connection until much later in life. And so I ended up down this path of becoming a rabbi in sort of an obscure way. I minored in college in Slavic languages, which I've yet still to meet anybody else who did that, major or minor, but it was in fact a minor at the school I attended, and it was mine. So I took Russian for many years and a little bit of Czech here and there, and I found myself volunteering or wanting to volunteer with a nonprofit. It happened to be a Jewish nonprofit, but I tell you that really didn't matter to me here nor there. But what did matter to me was that it had a location in Moscow, and I would be going to work with kids. They happened to be Jewish kids, Jewish families that were getting ready to immigrate to Israel. And they were sort of making these adjustments before they left Moscow. And I would be in the Moscow office helping these kids prepare for their new life, which was ironic because I hadn't really spent any time in Israel, but apparently I was equipped to do this just because of my language skills. So the summer after my junior year in college, I was ready to head off to Moscow. And that was, now I'm going to date myself, but I think we're of all ages here. That was the summer of 93. And there was, or the spring of 93, there was a bit of political unrest in Moscow, and they were not taking any volunteers, but they said, would you like to go to our Jerusalem office instead and work with the kids once they get there? I was just eager to go abroad, so I landed in Israel for about 3 months, or just under. And that's kind of how I ended up down this path. I just was all of a sudden surrounded by a culture and a tradition and a religion that was technically mine by birth, but I had never really embraced, and I found it to be unbelievable. So I just kind of played this, like, I call it sort of learning on steroids. I mean, I took as many classes as I could, and I worked, and I was living with an Israeli family, and I just came back to the States after that summer, just very jazzed about this gift that was mine, but I had never sort of unpacked. And that started me down the path to not going towards foreign service, and instead going towards the rabbinate, which I did 3 years later. So, and then I served, after 5 years in seminary, I served a congregation in Seattle, Washington. Who here is from Washington? Was that you, Abby? Yeah, hi. So I was in Woodinville for 5 years. And now I've been in Nashville for 15 years. And that is how I ended up in Tennessee. I still am a little unclear about how I went from Southern California to Tennessee. And I was at a college reunion not too long ago, and everybody was like, where do you live? Well, how did you go there? Why do you live in Tennessee? But I like to say, first of all, Tennessee is beautiful. The people are awesome. And I'm right where I need to be to share the words I think I need to share. But my husband is also a rabbi, and we work together at Congregation Micah. And we feel very privileged and lucky to be here. So.
Okay, so many things in the midst of just that first story. So I'm so interested first, when I think it's always interesting when people come to a religion later in life, right? And so what was it specifically? Was it more the theology drawing you in? Was it the practices? Like, what? I'm interested if it was one or the other or both.
Three things. It was the community. Community is just, I don't think it's just powerful in Judaism, but it's so powerful. It's so primary in Judaism. And then the rituals that sort of mark and shape the moments of your life to elevate them beyond the mundane, right? I mean, we could call them rituals, you can call them practices, but the set of rituals that exist within the Jewish tradition. And then third, I would just say, yeah, it was the theology, but specifically it was this theology of like argument and debate and questioning that I really appreciated, because, you know, I would have been the first to have gotten on that plane to Israel and said, there's no God, I don't believe in God, that, you know, without even understanding like how limited I was about my own pediatric definition of what God was. And so the opportunity to just, you know, ask questions and to struggle and to learn and to have biblical characters presented to me who were like deeply flawed, that, you know, felt like I was sometimes looking in the mirror. It was great. It was just great. I mean, I think about that sometimes when I walk into, say, like a 5th grade classroom and think like, what am I about to tell these 5th graders about their tradition that won't ultimately turn them off, so they don't just happen to be lucky enough to maybe come back to it later in life, right? Like we sometimes, I think, present to our youngest members of the community a very small, boxed in presentation of kind of how the world works, giving really just like discounting their ability to use their imagination and think big. That's really our problem, not theirs sometimes.
True. I'm also really interested. So most of us that have been a part of Imaginarium for some time, we've either are still in a Christian space or grew up Christian and have moved on from that, but that's our at least familiar ground. So I'm interested within Judaism, and when you're first coming to this and being exposed to this, were you exposed to the more liberal form of it then? Like, were you exposed to reform? Does it have those clear sort of, here's a liberal community versus a conservative, and what were you exposed to first?
Okay, great question. So it's interesting because in Israel, you have, for the most part, secular Israelis who don't participate in religious life in any way, shape, or form, and that is most of Israel. And when they do need something religious, like a wedding for a family member, then they go to the Orthodox rabbi. It's this odd sort of weird crossover of like values and sort of just a throwback to, well, this is just what there is, almost like there's no other option. And then you have an emerging progressive community in Israel that is mirrors kind of the progressive community in the rest of the world, particularly in America and Canada. And so I knew who I was. I was very centered and grounded in kind of who I was identity-wise. But I was very eager to actually absorb and take in as much of the kind of traditional Jewish education as I could, but with never a sense that I couldn't sort out for myself what was, kind of like, for example, Judaism, like Christianity and Islam, is rooted in patriarchy and it's patriarchal at its core. So I could always sort that out for myself, but I still wanted to know, like, give me the foundation and then I'll reform from that, which is essentially what Reform Judaism is, right? So I got to know where we started so I can know where I'm going. So that's sort of how it was for me.
Lovely. Makes a lot of sense. So are there female rabbis across the board or only in Reform?
Yeah, so just for a little bit of background, there are sort of 3, maybe 4 major denominations in Judaism in the United States. Reform, which is kind of the most progressive on the left, then conservative and Reconstructionist, and then Orthodox. And there are a few other kind of disparate ones, but those are the main ones. In Nashville, we have Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. And your question, Melissa, was?
Are there female rabbis in all?
So within all the progressive movements in Judaism, meaning everything except Orthodoxy, there's ordination of rabbis. But depending on the seminary or even the sort of affiliation within Orthodoxy that you are, there is a recognition of the strength and power of the female leader and educator. She is not called rabbi, she's called rabbah. But not in any way a diminishment. It's really just granting a full title that is uniquely female, because there's really been a recognition, which I think is fantastic, in this particular denomination of Orthodoxy or sect of Orthodoxy, that women have something entirely different, sometimes not better, just different to offer, because they are female versus male in this regard. And our modern Orthodox synagogue here in Nashville, Shereth Israel, which is located at Bowling in West End, Rabbi Saul and his wife Daniela just was ordained as a rabbi.
Oh,
Brilliant. So
love it. And what's the process for you to become a rabbi? Like, what does that look like?
For those who become Reform rabbis, there's one seminary, the Hebrew Union College. So after you finish undergraduate collegiate work, it's a 5-year process, 1 year in Israel and 4 years in the States. And there's a practical as well as an academic part to that. So it sounds like a long time, but it feels like it was a blur.
And did you and your husband, you were both already pursuing that?
Yeah, we met in Israel, but we have this funny story that I'll keep short, which is that my best friend from high school, who's Catholic, went to Berkeley and met and has since married his best friend from high school, who's Catholic. And they introduced us, which they love to say they introduced the 2 rabbis and they're Catholic, but that's how.
Love it. And was Congregation Micah already in existence when you came?
Yeah, Congregation Micah is almost 30 years old, and the first rabbi or founding rabbi his name is Ken Cantor. He's now in Cincinnati, And he was the rabbi there for 13 years. There was an interim for a year, and now we're in our 15th year there.
Oh, lovely. And so we all know in the midst of COVID times, things are very different, but what does your week look like there with Congregation Micah?
You know, interestingly, between middle of March and up until the holidays, our holidays a couple weeks ago, it was just kind of we were in this strange cloud of like COVID land. Anything we did was virtual, and it was almost like an alternative schedule. I can't describe it, but it felt like a much slower pace. You know, I don't know if everybody had this experience, but in the first sort of month or 6 weeks of quarantine, I think we were so desirous for connection that I did a lot of like Zooming and programming and wanting to hear different speakers and just kind of keep myself active. And then I sort of petered out on all of that. And I think a lot of people did as well. And now, post holidays, it feels like my schedule is a little bit back to normal, like it was pre-COVID, and I'm exhausted. Like I don't have the stamina for it in the same way. But you know, weddings are kind of getting back on the books. People are deciding that we'll just do it smaller. We'll have it outside. We have all sorts of life cycle events that are ramping up. Some are in person if they're small and socially distanced. Some are on Zoom. All of our adult education classes are starting. I will say, it's daunting to look at the week and see how much of it is tech oriented. For me, there's a different level of exhaustion of being like this, and you don't get the same, it's just not the same as hugging and being in proximity with the people we care about. But we're all just gonna make it because it's the safest thing to do.
Definitely. So I'm interested personally, and I think a lot of us would be interested. Practices are a big deal to us here, obviously. And we've known, even though many of us have stepped away from institutional religious spaces, that we still wanted to carry some ritual with us and how meaningful ritual is to our lives. So I'm interested, what are meaningful practices for you in your week outside of the ones you're mentioning, your high holy days and the Jewish calendar? Outside of that, not to dismiss that, but outside of that, what are some things that keep you grounded and centered, especially during this time?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest one is not something that's inherently religious, but for me, deeply spiritual. And I've been a runner for about 31 years. So I get outside in one of our gorgeous parks every single morning.
Wow.
I mean, if I don't go every morning, I'll get there in the afternoon. But being in nature for me is really important, breathing that air. And I will honestly say, I think I've discovered I'm more of an introvert than I realized. I think 20 years of community building, COVID made me realize that it was kind of nice to have a few months of just kind of being with myself. And now I'll have to find some sort of way to go back halfway, because I really need that. And so while I've had over the years different running partners or groups, I've really enjoyed the mandate to kind of do it by myself, which I've done mostly for the last 8 months. And so that is my grounding and my sort of, I call it my moving meditation. And it sort of centers me for the day and lets me sort through thoughts. You know how at 3 a.m. everything can seem a whole lot worse than it probably really is? Well, 1 hour in Percy Warner Park and I can undo all of that I was up at ruminating about in the middle of the night. Also, I tend to write my best sermons on those roads. So and I guess the other thing I would say is it's not a new thing, and it's not just for Jews or Christians or whomever decides to take it, but having a Sabbath, Shabbat, and really taking this one day or times during the week where it's like carving it out and saying this is just for me and for what I need in this moment, is something that I didn't feel like I could allow myself to do, because you feel the imperative of the on-callness, I think, in the clergy role. And that's something that I think I'll be able to kind of take with me out of 2020 and into whatever we return back to, I'm not sure. I mean, the last thing I'll say is somehow I seem to have found a stronger voice to talk about the things that really matter to me during COVID. In some way, and I haven't figured out exactly how to express this, but the urgency of this virus and astounding number of lives lost and unrecognized and unmarked by our highest office in this country has given me a new go card on speaking what I think is my truth to places that are in violation of power. And that feels good. And I'm grateful to be in a community, a religious community where that is supported and encouraged, because I don't think that happens all the time. And that's probably why a lot of people leave organized religious communities sometimes. But
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And you've gone exactly where I want to go, because I was going to say, I mean, what is your urgent word for this time that you wished, if you had a microphone, to all of America that was actually listening? I mean, what's on your heart to hope that they would hear or see?
Well, and I know there are people that are doing this better than I will be able to say it, but I think that once upon a time in our country, there was place for the religious voice in the public sphere, but it's become, understandably, like, we know that for so many years in our country and around the world, that public discourse has been tainted by some of the most extreme and regressive versions of religion, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, religious leaders have used sacred texts and their understanding of the will of God to justify racism, white supremacy, environmental destruction, attacks on women's bodies, women's health and rights, LGBTQ rights. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I think that there is a time now for the right voices to remind everyone that there's a really important role that religion has to play in politics. And I know that probably makes the hair stand up on backs of some of your necks, but let me explain what I mean. If I take just the Torah, which is Old Testament, and we think about the main story there, you've got this band of slaves who are rising up before the most powerful and iconic ruler of the ancient world, Pharaoh, and demanding freedom and dignity. Like, that is the most political message there is. And 4 of the 5 books of the Old Testament, of the Torah, tell the story of the journey of our people from slavery to freedom, from degradation to dignity. And so, lest we think that it's an abstract, theoretical, or one-time journey along the way, the Israelites are commanded to establish a society that would be the antithesis in social policy and political reality of Egypt. And we are charged to build in the promised land really what's supposed to be a counter Egypt. It's a place in which human beings are free and where we're tasked to honor our neighbor's dignity through impartial laws and fair judgment and acts of compassion and love. And I think that voice needs to be in the political arena. And can I just say one more thing about that?
Yes, keep going.
Okay, a couple things. I want to tell 2 stories. One is when the spies are sent. Does anybody know the story of the spies who were sent to scout out the land? Does anybody remember that story? There's this story in the Old Testament where the Israelites are like hightailing it to get across the Jordan River, and they're close. And Moses says, "Okay, 10 of you are going to head out and go check it out and see what it's like." And so they do. And most of the spies come back really freaked out. Like, there's just no way. We're going to get totally creamed. But Caleb and Joshua defy the majority, and they see exactly what everybody else sees, but they call the Israelites to face this inevitable challenge of establishing a complex society with spiritual tools like faith and hope and love. And so if we just tell these biblical stories as entertainment and not let their stories guide and strengthen our own resolve to fight for what is right today, then we can't even call it a sacred text. And so I want to, so I don't know if this happens to you, but my brain sort of like shuts down and then it goes to, let me take you to another story. The other story I wanted to bring up was Sodom and Gomorrah. Who doesn't love a good Sodom and Gomorrah retelling, right? All right, well, let me tell you something about Sodom and Gomorrah, because if you've read anything about Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis, there's not a whole lot of detail about the story there. But there's a lot that we can glean from the stories that the rabbis in the Jewish tradition tell about what happened. And let me pause just for a second to give you a little glimpse into Jewish sort of academic thinking. So you've got the sacred text, right? But the rabbis say sometimes there's not enough detail and we're going to need some more stories to flush out what might have happened. Now you can imagine those stories are sometimes leading and clearly biased and have their own motivation. I'll give you an example before I go back to Sodom and Gomorrah. Cain and Abel, that's a pretty popular story, right? Cain rises up and kills his brother Abel, but we don't really know exactly why. And even there's like a ... in the text, right? It says like, Abel came to see Cain and we don't really know what happened, ... Cain rises up and kills Abel. It's like, well, what happened? Like, how bad was that fight that's how it ended? So the rabbis come in and they're like, oh, we have 10 stories to tell you exactly what happened between Cain and Abel and why Cain was so angry. Now, those stories aren't written in the text itself, but we come to be so familiar with them that sometimes we have a trouble remembering as a Jewish community which ones are actually in the text and which ones are the ones we've just grown up with. It's sort of like family lore, right? We have all this sort of hyperbole in our own family. Like, remember the time that Grandpa Joe lifted the car so Grandma Edna could climb out and he used super strength. And I mean, these stories aren't real, but they become part of our lore, right? So that's what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is the story that the rabbis tell. They say that the reason that God was so angry that he wanted to destroy, or she, God, I'm not using like an actual pronoun for God, but it's hard to like speak about God without throwing something out there. But the reason that God was so angry and destroyed those cities was because the land had unbelievable natural resources. It was a blooming oasis in the middle of the desert. It was abundant in food and gold and silver. It was so blessed as a land that the inhabitants of the land said, why should we open our borders to foreigners and let them in? Because they'll only deprive us of what's rightfully ours. And so the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, they wanted to close the borders to outsiders. And they wanted to clamp down on insiders who would show compassion or care to the least of these. And there was actually the scarcity mentality that was met with an overt criminality. There were these terrible crimes that were committed inside Sodom. They would cheat the poor and attack people for showing compassion to the poor. And actually, there's a story about the daughter of Lot, who is Abraham's nephew, and her name was Plotit. And the story goes that she sees this poor person starving on the street. And she saw this poor person every day when she would walk to and from the well to get water. And her soul ached for this man. And every day she would feed this man on her way to the well. And the people of Sodom were so evil that they couldn't figure out how this person was not dead already, like still surviving, because he should be dead by now. How is he still surviving? And so they investigated and they caught Lot's daughter Plotit in the act of helping him, and they burned her to death. And it's said in our tradition that she cried out this aching cry, and it was horrible. And that's the cry that God heard, and it made God so angry. So there was a scarcity mentality, and it was matched with overt criminality. And the most egregious thing is that it's met with immoral law and justified and propped up all the cruelties that they were engaging in. And the rabbis tell the story this way, I think, because, as I mentioned, there's not a whole lot of detail in the actual text itself, but they knew that Sodom could be burned, which is what happened. But the ethic of Sodom would continue to rear its head wherever it could. And when the conditions were suitable, and we're like called to be attentive to the scarcity ethic and the overt criminality and the legal systems that support these injustices. And that is what I think religion is meant to do in the political arena today. And I come back all the time to the namesake of our synagogue of Micah, right? Like, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. The mercy and the humbly part cannot happen if the doing justly part doesn't happen first. So all those people we know are like, I'm compassionate, I'm kind, I'm good, I'm humble. It's like, okay, but where are you like working in the world? All right, I'll stop talking.
I love it. Listen, I haven't heard a sermon in a hot minute, and I'm like, woo, I want to like talk back to you. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you for that. Okay, I want to open up. I have a few more questions, but I'm going to wait until we close to ask you those sort of more fun and one-pointed one. But I want to open it up to you all. Do you have questions for Rabbi Lori on, it can be on nothing she's said thus far or on something she's already talked about that you want to go a little bit deeper with? The floor is open.
I have a question, more of a comment, I guess. I love sitting at the feet of Jewish rabbis to listen to their history. After being in Christianity for 3 or 4 decades, it's almost like Christians didn't actually learn the Old Testament at all or anything about it. It almost seems like such a morsel-fed way of learning it. And I sat at the feet of a Jewish friend 5 years ago for a couple hours, and she was just talking and talking. I never knew any of these stories. And to hear it unpacked and then in a very, very colorful way, oh, that's why. That's no big deal. But in Christianity, it seems like they're still fighting the war kind of thing. And so I appreciate you coming out and talking. I really do, because every time I hear someone that's Jewish faith speak, I always learn a lot more about my old faith, especially the Old Testament, that we just never knew, it seemed like. I really do. I thank you.
Well, thanks for saying that. You know, I want to share something that happened this week that has not happened to me since I was ordained 20 years ago. And that is that one of our young teens, who kind of was like the sort of leader of for a team, she was a governance role in our youth group and just, you know, like savored every moment of her bat mitzvah preparation, which not all kids do. And anyway, she's decided that she wants to be Christian. And her parents are like basically freaking out. And, you know, when they reached out to me at first, I also reacted defensively. Like, how could this, you know, what did I do wrong? Was I not a good enough teacher? You know, what happened? Anyway, then, so we've met for coffee a couple of times, she and I, and she's super thoughtful and really bright and mature beyond her years. And she's just searching. And to your point, she's, you know, like reading the text, and she just felt like something was missing, and she started to read New Testament, and she felt like it connected for her and made a lot of sense. And I can't be anything but just really happy for her that she's sort of on this path. Her parents are not very pleased with me at this moment. But I just think, yeah, I think we all sort of fail at transmitting the best of our tradition. And I'm not sure why, but I'm hoping I figure out how to do it better before I retire. That's my goal right now. So I hope you keep hearing great stories and learning more. So.
I love that. To me, I mean, I think I'm reminded in this hour thus far of just the beauty of religion and how it can be used in such a powerfully good way. We hear about the negative way too often. So you're already reminding me of that. Okay, what else, y'all? Yeah, Ivy. Oh, sorry. Let's go to Ivy and then we'll go to Nathan.
So after college, I lived in the Czech Republic, and I know a little bit of Czech, and it's always so surprising and fun whenever I encounter anyone who's familiar with that language at all.
Ahoy!
Ahoy! But I just wanted to ask you, it's not serious at all. I have majored in language in college as well. Anyway, I just was wondering why you studied Slavic languages.
Oh, it's not it's not a story of high intelligence. I always have been a huge reader. I love to read like anything sort of historical fiction, political fiction, spy fiction. And I'm trying to think who the author was, but I read this amazing book. God, I'll try and remember before the end of our session here. But it was about sort of all sorts of spy theatrics in the former Soviet Union. And I just was taken by the idea of foreign service and Slavic lands from reading that book. And that's how I ended up, I mean, totally random, but that's how I ended up studying that.
That's really cool and funny that it brought you all the way here.
Yeah, and I also spent a few weeks in the Czech Republic as well, and thought it was just beautiful. Loved being there. So it's neat that you were there as well. Yeah, really great place.
Love it. Nathan.
I was just going to ask, so you referenced these, I guess, different stories, right? These different stories that are different from the tradition, maybe that is being shared. I'm curious, are those written down anywhere? Because I would love to, I'd love to learn more about it, but I don't even know where that I would start on something like that.
It's a great question. So there are lots of different compendiums of midrashim, of these. Midrash, the word comes from the Hebrew lidrosh, which means to examine or to discover. So these examinations or discoverings of the deeper meaning of the text. So two sources I could recommend that both would be in English. Anything by a rabbi named Norman Cohen, Cohen, Norman Cohen. And there's also a book called I'm gonna have to ask my husband because I can't remember the name of it, but I'm gonna ask him in just a minute. And I'll put it in the chat. But there's another big text that has lots of midrashim, these little stories. And there's modern midrashim too. Did anybody read The Red Tent, Anita Diamant's The Red Tent? That's a midrash, guys, right? Because that's not the exact story. It's like a hyperbole on the story. It fills it out for us, brings it more to life. Or does anybody remember the story of Abraham was smashing the idols in his father's? Is that more of like an Old Testament thing? Well, there's all these stories that we think, oh, that must be in the text, but it's not in the text. They're midrashim. But go with Norman Cohen, and then I'm going to ask my husband before we sign off what the name of this other one is. That's in Hebrew and in English. That has lots of these stories in it. And the one that I can't remember the name of right now is it's indexed in the back, so you can look it up by like biblical verse. Is there a midrash on Psalm 151:4? Oh, well, there's no 151, 154, and you can see if there is. So it's a really easy way to kind of, if I'm looking to teach on the Noah story, I can reference from the appendix all the different midrashim on that story. So it's very helpful. I'll remember the title.
I love it.
That sounds fascinating. Thank you.
And we'll put it on our community page too. We love shared resources, so we'll add all that there.
I'm crazy, I can't think of it.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Leah, I see your hand.
Okay, my internet's being weird, so that's why my camera is off. I don't want to mess it up, but yeah, thank you for coming. This has been amazing and makes me kind of want to attend one of your services. So I kind of have two questions. One is, what does a service look like? Like, I have in my brain what a church service looks like that I'm familiar with. And I feel like it's probably not accurate to be like, but that with Jewish things instead of Christian things. So I guess the first is, what do your services or gatherings look like, either pre-COVID or during COVID? And then my second question is, you mentioned the importance of Sabbath. So what does Sabbath look like for you?
Okay, great question. So just like, and depending on the church you go to, the service is going to be different. Depending on the synagogue you go to, the service will look a little different. The music may be different. The order of prayers might be slightly different. But it will be similar in that there is an order to things. And at Micah, we do some things in Hebrew and some things in English. We like to sing a lot because we believe that music can lift people spiritually in ways that no words can. So we're a lot about music and chanting. Everything's on Zoom for us now. So if you're interested in, I would say just come to a service and check it out. We're every Friday at 6 o'clock. You're more than welcome. And it'll give you a sense. And, the nice thing about, one of the silver linings of COVID, because we know there's not too many, is that you can sort of be a service voyeur, and you can travel around the country and check out different services. And so I recommend coming to one of ours and then going and checking out someone else's, and just to see how it's different. But basically the Jewish prayer service is meant to retell the story of the Jewish people from beginning to end in sort of a 1 hour period of time. So there are, different themes to the prayers that kind of take us through from creation to covenant with God at Mount Sinai. And then to today, like, what is our charge today? How do we sort of carry the mantle? So that's kind of the basic outline of a Jewish service, and it's filled in with readings and music and maybe a sermon that's hopefully relevant, meaningful, and keeps you awake. And sometimes a story and not a sermon, depending. And sometimes just an ask the rabbi when I didn't have time or my husband didn't have time to write a sermon. So that's the service. And then I think the other question you asked was about Shabbat. Shabbat is just the Hebrew pronunciation for Sabbath, which just means to rest. And, I would say there's the way to observe Shabbat in a more traditional Orthodox manner, the things that you are meant to refrain from because it's a day of rest. But in a progressive community and in a progressive interpretation, what we encourage people to do is just to make that day unique from other days. And it might be just because there's one thing you do on that day that you don't do all the other days. And that one thing could be lighting candles at sundown on Friday night. And maybe that's the only thing that makes that day look different, but somehow you separate out and mark out this day is different because of this ritual. And it might be more than one ritual. There are lots of different ones that you can do. So for me, it's been a lot easier to have a Shabbat, a true sort of break day of rest during COVID. But now that things are, I wouldn't say they're getting back to normal, but we're just kind of ramping up our programming, which now I'm thinking, why are we doing that? But we are. And so I'm now back to working on Saturdays and Sundays, and I won't have the same kind of Sabbath, but that's part of the gig.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Did you get both your questions, Leah?
Yes. Well, except maybe can you put in the chat how to join a service?
Oh, yeah.
I assume I can just do Google, but
I'm going to do that right now. And I'm also calling my husband to ask him, what is the name of the big Midrash book that you have in English in your office, but it also comes in Hebrew?
Sefer Haggadah.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, it was driving me crazy. So first of all, it's called the Book of Legends. I'm putting it in the chat. And the Hebrew, I'll put it in there too, in case you need that. Okay, so that's that. And then you can just go to our website, and if you go under services or events, it will hopefully give you everything you need. But here is my email address as well. And if you can't find what you're looking for or a Zoom link or anything, just email me. I'll send it to you.
Love it. We'll also share all of that in the community page to our group. I think Malia, you and I and David and Sarah, did you participate with us when we came and sang at a service? Yeah, I think I don't know if Sarah did, but Malia and David did. A few of us were.
Lauren and Randy.
Lauren, Randy, yeah. So we were able to go participate January, a year ago, but I would love, especially, yes, let's all Zoom now. And then also when we get to be in person, we can come together.
We'll have Imaginarium night.
Love it. Done. Done. Okay, anybody else?
Wine before the service.
Oh, say it again.
Serve wine for the service. Just saying.
Another reason why we're coming. Anybody else have a question or a comment? Yeah, Chris Hauser.
Thanks for being with us today. This has been so wonderful. A lot of us here in the Zoom have come through this same progressive evangelical church experience. And one of the foundational ideas and stories for us is from the Garden of Eden. And where the idea that most evangelical fundamentalists are in is that there was sin and then separation. Adam and Eve sinned, they were separated from God. And we came into a fresh understanding of that they were never truly separated, that they felt shame and then felt estranged from God, but that was really on their part. It was not God separating himself from them. And I would just love to hear your perspective on any of that. You probably could talk for hours about it, but if you've got any thoughts off the top of your head relative to how you perceive that story relative to sin and separation versus shame and estrangement. Thanks.
Okay, you're so welcome. I love the question. It's a great one. I think that the story of sin and estrangement and separation, for lack of a better term, is very lame. I do not care for it at all. And I'm not even sure I really like the idea of sin and shame, but I'll like sort of suspend that for a moment. So sometimes you'll have a prayer in any one tradition that acts as an apologetic, right? You know, it's sort of speaking directly to this tradition or this pagan tribe and saying like, we are not you. And we have one of those in the morning service in the Jewish tradition. The prayer is Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. God, the soul you have given me is pure. And that is clear as day for a reason, because I think my understanding is that the message is that no, our souls are amazing and they're pure, and we have like a choice in every moment of how to sort of like engage that soul. But the rabbis are also realistic and they say, yeah, but here's the deal. Every single one of us has within ourselves a yetzer hatov and a yetzer hara, a good inclination and an evil inclination. This is where I want to like screen share to the movie Animal House, where there's like the angel and the devil on the shoulder. I always think about that. And so we have within ourselves the opportunity in every moment to sort of go with our good inclination or to kind of follow our evil inclination, and evil in a way that's like just not the choice we'd like to make. Right? I mean, even I will tell you before, I know I'm digressing, but let me just share the story. Right before we started, I'm in this awesome book club with these amazing women who are all Christian, very progressive Christian women. I'm the only Jewish woman. And I was sharing a tweet that Steve Schmidt, who's the head of the Lincoln Project, had tweeted to our president today. And it was like really kind of direct and harsh. And so I was sharing it with my book club, and one of the amazing older women in my book club wrote back and she said, you know, it's gratifying to read those words, but aren't we being just drawn down to like the worst common denominator? Like if we're like, and I didn't feel like shamed or humiliated. I just wrote back and I said, my gosh, you're right. Like the people we dislike the most are the ones who cause us to behave in ways that we aren't proud of. And so now I'm going to come back to the idea of shame for a moment. I just think that in every moment we have an opportunity to maybe make a bad decision and a bad choice. But what I appreciate, at least about my understanding of the Jewish tradition, and I don't think this is just for Jews, is that we also have in every moment the opportunity to make a turn and a change, and to say like, that was a screw up. I was wrong. And now I have the opportunity to I'm at that fork in the road again. And this time I'm going to go right instead of left, or left instead of right, whatever it is. And so to the Garden of Eden, I think that the story was told the way it was because it needed to serve a purpose to get us on this path where we would need a certain kind of God. And that God that's presented to us, at least in Torah and Old Testament, is very much a one of divine providence, right? Like you walk in my ways, you'll be rewarded. You don't, you will be punished. I just like to think of it differently. Like I walk a certain way and I become a partner in creation. And I walk this way and I become a partner in like holding us back or keeping us from being the best that we can be as a global community. So I've never been particularly fond of the narrative of the Garden of Eden story for that reason, except for the part where Eden is just kind of a badass and she's really leading the way. I really like that part of it, but yeah.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for that. I'm interested, because we're a non-religious community and just simply put humanity first when you're in this space, not your religion or your doctrines or convictions. But I am very interested as someone coming and being a part of a religious space. What is your best current definition of God?
Oh God, we were just talking about this in a class that I'm teaching with a colleague of mine in Michigan called Are You Jewish Enough? And we got in this whole conversation about, well, don't you need to know what God is or believe in God if you want to say that? But let me back up to say that to your point about sort of non-specific, humanity focused more than sort of specific on religion. I couldn't agree more. I really think that religion is a lens through which we see the world and better understand our role in it. But that there's so many different lenses, right? And that's why I think some people struggle with like, well, none of these religions fit for me, but I am a spiritual person. Well, great. That doesn't mean you're not. It just, that lens isn't fitting. And it's why, you know, the right Christian community is one that I could also be a part of too. I mean, one of my closest friends in town, David Perez, is at Sparrow Day, and he, I think, came from the evangelical world once upon a time and is sort of like seeing the light, if you will, and is, you know, kind of forging a new path. And when David preaches, I'm like, yeah, I'm all about that, Jesus. I'm totally, that works for me, you know? So I think sometimes it's just that we're trying to figure out what stories express what it is we care about. But there are no stories that are more true than another or right than another. I really fully believe that, which is why I think I could be like a member of Imaginarium if you want me. So, but anyway, I could be your first rabbi. So
done.
But for God, I just understand God to be the force that reminds me of my humility, or to be humble, that it's a reminder that there's so much more than what I can even possibly comprehend. And for me to think that my actions don't, someone might take that to say, well, what I do doesn't matter because I'm just one small person in this whole complex universe across time and space. And I would say, no, because of that, you have no idea what consequences or ripple effect your actions could have. So it works both ways. And so for me, it's just a reminder that, you know, like I'm not awesome in every moment, but I'm just like achieving or striving for as many awesome moments as possible. And that I think is because I feel compelled by this idea that there's God.
Love it. And what's in this moment, like literally in this moment in America, what are you seeing that is making you most hopeful?
I am seeing record voting and people really caring about the direction of the future of us and the next generation. And I'm also seeing my kids, your kids, our kids' generation, like being more evolved than I am, and you know, being a force for social change. And God, I hope that they continue to just have lots of fuel for that. So that has me hopeful.
Love it.
I mean, my God, I feel like we can only go up.
Yeah, you are correct. I think we all agree with that. Okay, and then last fun question. What's your favorite meal and favorite drink?
Okay, I love pizza. Pizza is probably my absolute favorite. And I'm a big wine drinker, like every day, run in the morning, wine at night. So yeah, red or white. I mean, just kind of depends on my mood, and it doesn't have to be fancy expensive, but I just love wine. So pizza and wine.
Same. I knew you fit here for a reason. So I think, I mean, I could take a poll, but I'm pretty sure we would love to take you as our first official rabbi in our non-religious space. If we were unmuted, you would. Oh yeah, we'll keep on the down low. Nobody will say anything except for in here. Thank you so much, Rabbi Lori. I knew from the first time that we sat down together that we were already deeply connected on lots of levels. And I'm just so grateful that you chose to spend an hour and 15 minutes of your time with us, reflecting on your past and your story and all the good that you're doing now. And again, for me, and maybe for many of us, reminding us of the beauty and when power is wielded from a good heart and a good place within religion. So we're so grateful for who you are and the work that you're doing. And I think you may get some new people visiting and maybe some new members, right?
Let me just tell you one thing. Even when we're back open, we love visitors. There's never a pressure to be a member. We love guests. You can come as much as you want and just be, we call it friends of Micah. Just come be our friends.
Love it. Well done. I think we would love to do that as individuals and maybe as a group too, once things open back up. Okay, y'all, the next time we gather for a gathering is the 25th, and we're hosting that day a Nashville author and activist, Eric Brown. Super excited about it. He has a new book out called Weekend Reflections that he actually just dropped off to me, and it's sort of reflections on being a Black man in America, but specifically in the South. I've known Eric for a while, specifically also because of the Nashville Pride Spirituality Night connection, which is also how I met Rabbi Lori. But he'll be with us the 25th. We have happy hour every Wednesday. We would love for you to join us. That's simply a time to come online from 5 to 6:30-ish and literally talk about any and everything and make your dinner together or have a drink together or make fun of HelloFresh as the Housers often do. Well, specifically Chris, not Laura, not just Chris. He makes fun of it. Our email list comes out every Monday morning. Tomorrow will be Body. It's our last Body email curated by Kate Moore. So make sure you get into that. She's going to transition on as she's focusing on some other things, but she's been such a force in content for us. I think that's all the announcements. Okay, grab your drink if you have one.
Book club.
Oh, book club. Thank you. I don't have my book handy. We're reading See No Stranger by Sikh activist Valerie Carr. Y'all, there it is. Malia's holding it up. It is amazing, y'all. I cannot speak highly enough about this book. It's so powerful. The stories in it, her challenge to us, it's inspirational. So we're reading it. And then on Monday night, the 19th, right? The 19th will be our first time that we discuss that via Zoom, just like this. So please, even if you haven't started it yet, grab it and join us for the conversation either way. And Rabbi Lori, in the midst of all your free time, which I realize you don't have any, but we would love to have you back in any possible way. Again, we're so grateful that you were with us, and we hope to be a part of what you're doing too. Okay, raise a glass, friends. I'm quoting today from Albert Camus, the French philosopher. He says, "My dear, in the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all that in the midst of winter, I found that within me an invincible summer, and that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back. May we keep pushing." Cheers, friends.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see you Wednesday or the next time we gather. Bye, friends.